comments. Item 2 is to discuss as may be needed any regular meeting agenda items for tonight's meeting. Council or staff, anything that we need to discuss? So, met with. No, you have to come in. Yep. So, Mr. Chandler, you
Yes.
we met and talked a little bit earlier today.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. So I want to discuss kind of the bigger picture of this zoning case. It's actually, I start off on the wrong foot. It's an amendment to a 2004 plan development with a site plan. And honestly, the only reason you all are seeing this site plan, because there was a site plan attached to the 2004 ordinance, is because of two exceptions the developer has requested. And I will show you what those are. But before then, you can see this is 7.9 acres at the corner, at Hogan Road, close to Pea Ridge. And so you've got to the south, Southern Draw neighborhood. And we heard from a number of the Southern Draw neighbors, as well as across Hogan, Hills of Westwood residents as well. All right. So the base zoning of O2 from 2004 with the plan development allows for apartments, actually allows for them up to 4 stories. What they're requesting are 2-story buildings and a few 3-stories, and we'll show you the site plan in a second, but a 100-unit apartment complex, actually townhomes. It's on a single lot, so we call them apartments, but they're actually 2- and 3-story townhomes. Okay, so looking at exception 1 that they've requested. So in multifamily and O2 requires a corner setback, corner of an intersection or adjacent to a roadway, public roadway, 15-foot setback. And so let me draw your attention. Well, we've got a better exhibit that I'll show you in a second, but you have Old Pea Ridge. So right-of-way, existing right-of-way that we have no plans to improve, probably never will, with the rerouting of South Pea Ridge and with the contract that was approved by you all in September for the Hogan Road improvements in South Pea Ridge, which we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But essentially this building, technically it's adjacent to a roadway. That's a corner setback. It's required to have a 15-foot setback. They're requesting 5. There you go. Got ahead of myself. All right, exception 2, we require for residential properties a 10-foot separation between accessory structures and a principal structure. So they're doing carports, and you can see the parking, you can see these red lines. So where those red lines are shown, they have requested a reduction of up to a 7-foot separation between the apartments and the covered parking. However, technically it's really 7'6", and a lot of those separations are actually even greater than the 10-foot separation. So we're actually looking at this in UDC updates with the consultant. That 10-foot separation is not something required by fire code, building code, and we support a reduction in a lot of cases, and in this one as well. But you can see with the red line where that reduction is requested.
Brian, are you saying that only those with the red line have a carport?
No, those are the only, they'll all have carports. Where there's a red line is where there's a reduction of the 10-foot separation.
Okay. And why is that? Because it's
the way the buildings are shaped.
oh, okay.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that's right. The angle
Got it. All right.
Yeah, thank you, Brent. Yes, the L-shaped units have the reduced separation, also 9.6. So they're asking for 7, but a bunch of those are close to 10, just still less than the 10-foot requirement. All right. So let's talk about road improvements. Let's talk about traffic a little bit and remind you all and the public that there's a CIP project. Contract was approved in September. And you can see improvements from current South Pea Ridge, that Hogan section that has not been improved, east of this project to Old Waco Road. That section was approved a couple years ago. So it's just that small section between the South Pea Ridge, kind of the old alignment and the new alignment, but it will include the new alignment of South Pea Ridge as well. So all the way down to Poison Oak. And here is the section that applies adjacent to this project. So 3 lanes, and that includes a continuous turn lane, no median. So it would be an unimpeded left out and right out, and in left in and right in as well. So just a continuous turn lane during that section. Also 6-foot sidewalks on both sides of the street as well. Looking at the number of trips that are generated by a 100-unit low-rise multifamily project, estimated daily trips of 674. When you look on the right, you may be able to see some tiny little dots that have numbers on them that would indicate the daily traffic counts at Pea Ridge, just to the west of this project, and then Hogan and Pea Ridge, and then also Hogan and Old Waco Road. So the one on the left shows at 2,074 daily trips, and then at Old Waco Road, 1,719, and these are 2021 numbers. So since Hogan Road, that section east of the project that I mentioned, was improved. And so the takeaway here is that community collector capacity per comprehensive plan, per the mobility master plan, average daily trips of 4,000 to 15,000. Of course, that's a big range. It just depends on the section, how many lanes. But even on the low end of that, when you take approximately 2,000 trips that are currently using this section of Hogan Road, and you add 674, still under capacity. All right. Also, looking at
You're saying the road will still be considered under capacity after
this project.
Got it.
Yes, ma'am. And I just wanted to highlight. You may remember this
Above
exhibit.
capacity.
Sorry.
The road will be above capacity.
Oh, the road will be
Yes.
above capacity. Yes,
Exactly.
sorry. Road will be above capacity. The traffic count will be under. So yes, thank
Brad,
you.
would
See,
you-
we need an engineer.
Would you flip back one, please? Yeah, that one.
This one?
No, that one.
Okay,
Thank you.
you bet.
Oh, that's it. Sorry.
You good?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, meant move forward.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right.
No.
Yeah.
I want
You get another shot of that slide in about 3 hours.
I'm gonna take pictures here.
And just a reminder and comprehensive plan also showing the different road classifications and description of the street cross sections, the amenities included. The takeaway here, community collector, that's where the 4,000 to 15,000 capacity estimate came from. Don, I borrowed this from Richard. I hope you don't mind. A great slide, particularly I think for these projects that are in the middle of all these CIP projects. So I want to highlight the fact that number 8 is the Hogan Road South Pea Ridge CIP project that you all approved that contract in September. And so it's an estimated essentially 2-year construction timeline, which should line up very well if with this project and their construction timeline. But also looking at the phases of the outer loop, Poison Oak, also Kegley. And so you can see just how all of this is working together. These puzzle pieces are going to fall into place.
That's a great slide.
Well, yes, Richard put that together.
I think the format may have been inspired by the city.
Yes, she has had a variety of those. So
That's
I
very
give Richard
helpful.
credit, but I don't know if Richard actually created the slide.
I did not. It was the CIP team under James Billick.
There you go. All right. Way to go, James. Thank you. Appreciate your honesty, Richard. So any questions about this? But this is,
And Hogan, it will be considered a collector post
Yes, a
reconstruction.
community collector.
Got it. I mean,
So
that, yeah, community
yeah, so
collector.
that's,
Perfect.
yes.
It already is, except for the little section.
Right,
Right.
that's right. So
That-
it'll, there's
Finalize.
slight variations between the existing improved
Yeah.
section and what is proposed. A foot of right of way here and there, but they'll have the same amenities and the same 3 travel lanes, one of those being a continuous turn lane, except for strategic locations, median. All right, so sorry, 23-month construction timeline. All right, so lots of opposition, and certainly we saw at P&Z a number of folks show up. But in terms of the metrics that we calculate, you can see in red those within the 200-foot buffer that responded in opposition. And so that represents a total of 7.18%. So under the 20% that would trigger a supermajority. And then just very quickly, conditions, got a variety of them. Of course, minimum 10% landscaping, and we'll go over that in a second. The fire marshal wanted, just to reiterate, in terms of residential code, that table 3.02.1 applies. All other conditions from the ordinance from 2004 apply, and significant changes, of course, have to come back. So Planning and Zoning Commission added a couple conditions that I wanted to point out. And so this is actually an updated exhibit provided by the applicant showing this, but buildings 11 and 17 right here that are closest to Southern Draw neighbors, in response to neighbor concerns, P&Z recommended, the applicant has agreed to, for what it's worth. They don't have to agree, but P&Z's recommendation, does prevail to limit those buildings to 2-story. And you can see faintly residential lots just to the south on the other side of that old P Ridge right of way that we talked about. So there's still a good distance between those properties in the backyards of the Southern Draw neighbors. But also they wanted to clarify that if approved, the applicant could still make up for the loss of those stories in a different location, far away from the residential, presumably on this side, which of course that backs up to the Hogpen Creek drainage area and a future Parks Trail as well. And so here you can just see a close-up of those buildings, 11 and 17. And then this is my last slide. Just wanted to compare the current PD O2 zoning. Allows 4 stories, allows 118 units. That's the one condition in that PD ordinance of 15 dwelling units per acre, which if you do the math, that allows 118 units. They're proposing 100. They're proposing 2- and 3-story buildings as opposed to 4. They're proposing a minimum of 10% landscaping, 10 to 20, but that's a condition that we're putting in there at least 10 as opposed to 5 required by code. The other conditions that we went over, 5 additional ones, the landscaping by staff, the 2 by P&Z, would not be enforceable if they hadn't come through with the site plan and the exceptions. That's part of the trade-off. They get something, well, it gives you all an opportunity to add conditions. The 2 trail connections to the future Hogpen Creek public trail that will also extend up to the First Baptist Church property and up to Adams. Building separation, of course, we already talked about that, and the corner side setback. So in exchange for those 2 items, the ones above it are kind of additional. Otherwise, they can move their building. They could attach where you have the 5-foot corner setback. They could attach the carport to that building, move it so that it has a 15-foot setback. They could attach those carports to those buildings and not have a separation. And it just is not as nice of a product.
So how far on the one that has the 5-foot setback, how far will the corner of that building actually be from the driving surface?
So let's see. So yes, that's the 5-foot. And so there's still the old Pea Ridge right of way is there. And what is that?
Guesstimating how far from the driving surface?
What? Drop from the-
Well, there,
From the road.
Oh, okay.
yeah,
It's not 5 feet.
Build one there.
There's no road.
So yes, there is no road there. We've got, there's a gravel dirt drive
Oh.
in the right of way that I'm not sure what it's used for, but yeah, there is no public roadway
Okay.
there. It would actually be closest to the future trail. And you can see the Hogpen Creek indicated by the blue line. A trail on the east side of that is on the trail's master plan.
Sorry, I missed that somewhere.
No, it's good.
Build, ever building a road there, it'd be expensive crossing that creek at that angle, and it would serve no purpose.
Yes.
So everybody has access with these people. If this project gets access up to Hogan, we don't need backdoor access, and the other people aren't gonna want it, so it would serve no purpose.
And we do have a water line within that old right of way. And so abandonment may not be an ideal option at this time, but that's something that could be considered.
For that portion of Old Pea Ridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Abandonment to what?
Yeah, I mean, we own it.
The trail
If there
area?
was an abandonment, you all would have to approve that. But in case it, one to abandon it for, for the neighbors' southern draw, they wanted to
Or trail
Beautify.
area, yeah, okay.
something.
Council, anything else?
Any additional questions?
I haven't heard from any citizens. That's not my district, but, have y'all?
I think Mike's heard enough. Yeah, both of them.
Yeah.
I have.
Yeah.
And,
I received a
I
few.
got between Kathy and Mark and Mike, I got totally sorted out this morning.
Okay.
Understood. My questions were all answered. So I think just from a easier statement, we're getting the best we can get if this passes. Is that an overstatement or an
Well, that's-
erroneous statement?
That would be an opinion. So if you're getting better than what the code would allow, I would, for require, I would say yes.
That's what I meant.
If there, it doesn't mean that there couldn't be additional conditions.
Oh, no, I
added.
understand
But yes,
that, but yes, but if we rejected it, they can come back and do the 15 as opposed to the 12.
That's correct.
The 4
Exactly.
stories right in their backyard.
And 4 stories right in the backyard of the single family homes. And we know how upsetting that is for so many residents. We've been through that with a number of developments. So this is that, from that perspective, this is very good in that sense.
think it's important to remember, and I'm reminding myself, because, people will come to the podium and they'll say, I enjoy the green space, we've heard those things before, but remember, this isn't a zoning case,
Right,
right? It's already zoned, it's approved, and
precisely.
the developer is actually backing away for what they could, and I know you understand that, but just keep all that in mind, that with some concessions, the developer's been, what they could build versus what's actually going to be built versus, via the site plan is, the developer's giving up some units, right? And
Well,
it's,
and the distance between, away from the single family home is a big plus.
yeah, I think they've been, agreeable. Right,
Yes.
because they build, and everybody knows something like this, the more units you can put on the ground, better the cash flow, and they're giving up some cash flow to be able to do this. When they could agree to nothing and do what they want to do.
Would 3 stories, require a ladder truck? Or is that 4?
Stories is
Our fire department.
30 feet, 35 feet.
Yes, 3 stories requires a ladder truck.
And Chief, do we have a ladder truck close to the closest station or at the closest station?
We don't currently, but the expansion with Fire Station 9 does have a ladder truck for that, and that will be the primary coverage for this development.
Thank you.
That ladder truck exists, chief?
It does not currently, no ma'am.
So has it been ordered or is it doesn't exist? It's in our fantasy until we budget it.
It is in the business plan, ma'am.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else for Mr. Chandler?
So thanks for, I don't want anybody thinking this is not, my house is in this picture. I won't point it out, but my roof is in this picture right there. It's important to me. But, we're getting, like I think Susan said, I think we can get a better product by the negotiations that we're doing here. I appreciate it.
Likewise, I very much appreciate that the developer is understanding the concerns of the single family homes. We've been through that, down that road elsewhere several times over the past few years, and it's upsetting to residents.
Everybody okay with the traffic counts? If you need a picture, let me know. I'll send it out. But everybody's good? Okay, thanks, sir. Appreciate that. That was just the first viewing, right?
Yes. There is a longer viewing for the public.
Mayor, before we move on, I just wanted to point out, normally we bring ordinance amendments to you in a workshop before we put them on action agenda, but we do have a small kind of a stopgap. Ordinance amendment number 9, it's a small amendment in chapter 37, which will allow us, will give the city manager the authority to draft policies, adopt policies and pricing for garage parking and on-street parking. So that will allow us to go ahead and do that immediately. And then chapter 37 is a pretty large comprehensive ordinance. It's taking a lot of work from a lot of different departments. So we are working on that comprehensive redraft that will come back to you in the spring, but we wanted to go ahead and get this to you in the immediate future, so that way we can address the parking garages. So Kyle has a short presentation for the regular meeting, but if anyone has any questions about that now, we'd be happy to answer them.
Okay?
All right.
We'll wait.
All right.
Right. Okay, second item on the work session is to receive a presentation from Zonda Education regarding the City of Temple demographic study. Ms. Smith?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to introduce Rocky Gardner. He's here with us today from Zonda Education. You all recall in early 2019, we completed a demographic study for the city and we worked with Hamilton Demographics, now known as Zonda Education. And Rocky was actually the person that we worked with back then. And since that time, as you all know, some things really changed in Temple as far as our single family building permits in particular in 2020. So that's really changed our population. So what we've done is an effort, and as we begin our strategic planning process, we thought it would be prudent for us to go ahead and do another demographic study to really update those numbers and look at what our future looks like for Temple. So today, Rocky is going to go over with you all the U.S. Census trends, the current growth trends, and he'll also have a population forecast for our current city limits as well as our ETJ that he can share with you all. He did present to our reinvestment zone board yesterday morning, and we received a lot of good feedback, I think, from that group. So if you all have any questions, feel free. I'll let him go through.
Thanks, Eric.
What I got from the presentation yesterday is that you're retiring in at least 5 years.
Before the next round.
It's pretty like, that is the last time we're gonna see you.
The beauty of having to come twice, be here yesterday morning and today, but in between, I got to go see a new granddaughter that's only 4 months, so she's close by. So it worked out really well. You guys plan these that way all the time. So yeah, so we're back. I'm back, right? We did this study in 2019. I think it's 2017. Maybe even before 2019. It's been at least five years. We do research typically we do a lot of boundary and demographic work for school districts. So then we do some public stuff for cities. We've done some universities. So our team, demographic firm, understands research, understands what's going on, and then we go in and kind of dig in, see what we can get out of it. I actually cut my teeth in city and regional planning back with the Council of Governments in Dallas-Fort Worth area. So I started out doing population employment forecasting. We're doing school forecasting, a little bit of everything. So first thing I want to do is just kind of look at this 2010 to 2020 trend change. The city of Temple added about 24%. So we went from 66,000 to 82,000 persons from 2010 to 2020. So that's really significant growth. What they called their household occupancy remained about the same. We went from 28,000 to 35,000 homes. So you can see there in a household size, 2.52. So we know there aren't half of people at most homes, but that's the overall. There's parts of the city that are probably having more than 3 persons per household. Then you see apartment complexes and stuff like that that are less than 2 people per household. So the Census Bureau averages that out. We looked at the cities as well. So what we did here, because it's kind of an odd shape, we use census blocks. So we pulled census blocks that roughly made up your ETJ, and we added that to the city. So your ETJ population was just under 100,000 at 94,700. That's about a 22% jump. So with the city going almost 25%, we certainly saw some steady growth. And so the next thing that I wanted to look at is where this growth occurred. So I looked at the census block from 2010 and 2020 and looked at that trend in population. The red areas and the orange areas were actually where we saw some negative. Okay, so smaller household sizes. Likely it's like the kids, they move out of these areas and then the parents stay. So that household size drops a little bit. Population growth out west, down south, which kind of goes very well with what we've seen in some of the school district growth as well. So this trend, then we looked at it a different way. We decided let's look at the school districts. Where do we see the most change in school district? And if you look at Belton, almost the students, the population, again, this is based on census blocks of Belton that are in the city of Temple, almost doubled to over 20,000 persons. You can see here the shares that, Temple ISD dropped in share, where you saw the, Belton ISD grew by 10%. So just seeing where those shifts are, the growth in Academy and the growth in Belton are very similar to that previous slide. So my whole deal is that how do I follow these trends and then create some population change? We looked at race and ethnicity just to see if there was any shift. And really, your race ethnicity, these numbers stayed very flat. This is the one I like to point out because this doubled your other, and that really just doubled because of the changes in what the census, the questionnaire. More people could consider themselves themselves other than ever before. So they pulled them out of here and they just decided they would just be a little bit of everything. That was the freedom of the census thing. Then we looked at single family parcels by year built. So this, we pulled away from the census data and looked at the actual appraisal record year built because we want to see if that same trend showed up there. And as you can see, the blue and the green are the newest homes. And again, they're on this west side, just like that census plot, and down south. So that trend was very similar. We looked at appraisal district, again, the year built numbers. We peaked here in 2020, like many areas in Texas and really in the US. Following COVID, we saw this housing boom, right? And now we see things are beginning to slow down a little bit. We've got some 22-year bills, but there were so few that we didn't feel like it was a complete year. So we did not include that. But then we looked at the city data, the building permits issued by the city, single family and duplex, and you see the same trend. We peaked up here in 2020, 2021, 22. It was a pretty strong year. In 2023, the permit activity is now down a little bit. We're probably trending below 1,000 this year in the city permits. So we see that trend dropping off, and that's happening in lots of places right now. You know, the existing inventory is declining. We're not seeing as much existing home under for sale right now because of interest rates. We think people are wanting to stay put. They're staying in the house they're in because they got a 3% interest rate. To move somewhere, it costs them 7% and they get less house. So we know that slowed down a little bit. So we kind of put these pieces together to begin to look at population forecasting. Our team then goes in and we look at any areas in the city where there is active home building. So where there actually have homes under construction. So all these green polygons that you see on here are part of these 50 actively building subdivisions. So there's home building going on right now. Not only is there home build, but there's also 2,800 lots available to start homes on right now. So we have some strong, if you think about doing 1,000 homes a year, there's already enough lots sitting on the ground to keep that going for about 3 years. But then we're also exploring 18 future subdivisions with 11,000 lots. So we obviously have enough lot activity right now to do 1,000 homes a year until 2030 census.
Are those potential future subdivisions?
Yes, we don't include them unless there's a plat or something.
Okay,
So,
that was what I
but
meant.
there's no dirt moving. So
Yeah, I understand.
by raw land, right. Then I wanted to give you a few examples of how we forecast the population. I'm not going to go through one of these for all 50 of those active subdivisions or anything like that. So this is Lake Point Terrace. There's 450 homes that are currently occupied. Here's a September aerial. So you can see it's almost built at 686 total homes. Then we estimate the population based on what the Census Bureau provided us for household sizes. We could estimate population. So we know that, there was 1,070 persons currently in that area approximately. At build out, which we think will take about 2 more years, you're going to have about 1,600 persons from Lake Point Terrace. And we did this for a significant number of the developments, and they're in your book. A few more are in your book there. I've got a couple more slides here. The Concrete South, again, this is going to almost double. So there were 660 persons there. They've got total homes at 1,300, and you can see how they're putting them in there. And that should build out in less than 3 years. And then, of course, there's the apartment community. So there's approximately 1,391 homes under construction right now. Again, these could also be single family for rent homes that are in under one parcel of land, kind of like the product that you were just looking at. They're considered multifamily. 1,430 future multifamily units are in stages of discussion. And that's these, I never know what color to call that. Is that turquoise? Those turquoise colors? And then we got a few of those. 230 units are age restricted. So those age restricted ones are important to understand because that's usually like an over 55 population. which means that they're gonna have a lot fewer persons per home than what you'll see in a normal apartment complex. And then, of course, this is just a look at a couple of those apartments. So we know that when Ariza Temple 2 gets finished, this was back in July, they'll be leasing by February, and there'll probably be 400 persons there at build out. So with that, I'm going to talk about population forecast, and this is a lot of numbers and it might take you a while to, to think about it. But what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about the 2020 census, the 66,147, and then the 2020, first 2010 to 2020, 82,000, and then the housing units is what's important is from the Census Bureau. If you look at their households, there were 26,141. With the 2020, it was 32,620. What I did is I went back and I looked at the housing totals that were at 2010 and just added your city building permits just to see what the population number could be in 2020 if there was an undercount. Typically, we do see an undercount. So that's why you're seeing two numbers here. We forecasted a January 1, 2020, because the census day is April. The census, using census data, you'd be at about 85,000. Based on the numbers that I've estimated, I think you were probably closer to 93,000 in the city of Temple. And that's simply because I'm just adding up the houses that were built there. So there's an undercount likely, but there's an undercount likely everywhere you go. They've got a mammoth job and they do a great job, but there's no way they can fit everybody. And really for our work, it's almost good to have this range. Because I know 10 years from now, I'm not going to be exactly right. We're not going to have 119,914. That could be it. Could be 915. I could be off by one. So it could go anywhere. But what I'm looking at here is if we do 1,000 homes a year, we just continue to trend with what we know. And we know that there's over 15,000 homes out there already that we're aware of. We'd be looking right around 150,000 in the city of Temple. And I'm calling that kind of probably just about build out. There's not a lot of vacant land left after they build out these existing ones. So that's doing about, that would put you at about 2038 to 2040. Now, if it slows down, and that's this mid scenario, if it slows down and we only do like 800 homes a year, like say that just stays kind of flat, then that number 149, 126, it may not hit till about 2043. And then of course, if we go crazy, get 1,200 homes a year on average, we're going to get to 168, 678 by the time we get to the bottom. My challenge with this third number is I don't know that your city limits is going to hold that many persons. I think you're going to settle in right around this 150. So that's kind of my city projection. Then we wanted to look at the ETJ just because we know that's going to be important going forward. So the first thing I did with the ETJ is just look at the land that's out there. So we know we have some significant vacant land in your ETJ. There's 3,500 acres. I just grabbed these just to give you an idea of what I'm looking at, because there could be several thousand homes built in these areas, or we're only doing about 100 homes a year right now. There's not a lot of fast growth going on out there, but all it would take would be somebody combining some tracts of land. I think I heard yesterday that some of that's already beginning to occur to see things really pop. So with that, the same idea. I'm getting you pretty close to 200,000 in your ETJ. And that's with the mid scenario. Again, that's just adding about 200 homes per year. If I sprinkled in, I'm sorry, that's adding in, I put in about, I just assumed there'd be some big projects for the high end one. If we just do 100 homes a year, you'd be at about 680. And we do 200 homes a year, you're looking at 180,000. So that 180 to 200,000 for your ETJ is a pretty strong target.
And that obviously does not count what's in the city limit. Right, that's
It's added
ETJ
to it.
only.
No, it's added to it.
Oh, okay.
It does. It includes the 150. So what this is saying on top of that, it'd be 40,000 more in your ETJ on top of what's in the city.
In the previous slide, the numbers in the city, limits, is that?
These are city limit numbers
But
if they can put that many
that's
homes in.
current city limits, so with annexation, then it could be somewhere between the two.
Right, with yeah, because you're gonna annex. The annexation,
Maybe harder to do now, but
it's gonna come over time. It's not, you're not gonna get all that ETJ at the same time,
Yeah.
obviously. Yeah. So this is just using that current ETJ value to share with the city shared with us. You know, 2020 census, they reported that year A 2,193. I think it was likely, that was 25% growth. I think it was likely closer to 86,000 to 89,000. City building permits, appraisal records, they've averaged about 1,200 new homes a year the past 5 years. This past year, I think that they're down a little bit. But we got 59 active and future developments. That's a lot. 6,000 VDL and 8,500 plans. So we're looking at over 14,000 lots that we know about right now. Estimated population of the city of Temple is now well over 100,000, I believe. You're pricing around about 103,000 new homes per year would put you about 130,000 persons just in the next 10 years in the current city limits. And then the remaining vacant land tracts, your build out's probably about 145 to 150. And I think that the ETJ could push to 200,000 persons within 20 years. Talk fast. But I got nowhere to be at this point. That's silent.
Get a little confused in your presentation when you're talking about new homes versus multifamily apartment units. Those are new homes.
Mhm.
And those are potentially new people.
Sure.
So are those numbers part of what you're talking about also?
Yeah, so we're filling in, we're adding multifamily growth.
Oh, I
in
see.
as
I'm
well.
sorry.
And then we're guessing,
Okay.
where there could be more units. But we do separate those because the
Okay.
household sizes are a little.
Sure.
Too.
I'm sorry, I had not gone across.
I
the
should have pointed
afternoon.
that out. Thank you.
There's some sort of, industry approved number about possibly those developments that go on in the ETJ that ultimately might get annexed into the city limits.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So you have X number of people in the city limits, you have X number of people in the ETJ. Any estimation on how many of these in the ETJ might request annexation to be able to, because we have a policy here that the city doesn't extend water into the ETJ. So services don't go into the ETJ. Many times the developer prefers to be able to get those services, and we have a policy that requires them to be annexed.
Another question I was trying to get to.
I'm not sure that I don't know if there's any formula for that give you any idea on that.
You can just say 23%.
Does that sound right?
Sure.
But if we,
You're the guy doing a half a person up there, right?
Yeah, it's true. So if we round up, right, then there's a lot.
but if we annex, then the numbers would be somewhere between this and the next.
Right.
Certainly, it would just depend on
The full number,
where you.
That would make this number higher if we were annexed.
Your build out would go higher as well because your city limits extend.
Yeah.
As your geography changes, obviously.
But these numbers are based on us not having the exact same footprint we have.
These are just based on your current footprint.
Current, that's what's really important.
Yeah, these are based on your current city limits. So it might be prudent to use, when you start looking, 150,000 by 10 years in what the city of Temple could become.
Yeah.
If ETJs, the city limits are extended. Big city.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's exciting, but it's also a little intimidating, to think that, like I say, we're always behind, right? And with this accelerated growth.
It's hard to catch up sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is. But stay in front as best you can. I think that's what we'll do.
Mhm. Very good. Council, any questions?
This is really interesting. Thank you.
If questions come up later, just run through Aaron and just let me know.
Well, and I know, Aaron, that this is, the city of Temple numbers, but has anybody shared, I mean, this is the city of Temple's data, right? We paid for it.
Mhm.
Has anybody shared this with the ISD or?
Not yet. We wanted to bring it to you all first.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Are there more
I'm
of these?
happy to. They have their own done. As Rocky said, I think they actually work more frequently, probably with TISD and
Oh, yeah.
BISD in our area.
We work with, TISD
Mhm.
and we've built
Belton.
Temple Academy. We've worked with just about everybody around.
So these numbers should jive with theirs, because all
Well,
they're doing.
we don't forecast population for them. We forecast student
Students.
enrollment.
Student
Yeah.
Very
enrollment,
different.
but that's based on population.
It's a little bit,
Based on
it's based on, it's a similar formula.
Yeah.
It's a similar,
I think, because
certainly based on housing growth.
No, Temple, I think probably from what I was seeing and just my own knowledge, that Temple ISD and its limits probably has less children per house,
Has what?
less children per house.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that new areas tend to have more children anyway. So
Yeah.
anything in that new area is probably.
Right now,
25%.
82.1% of Temple students well, now 69% are Temple and 24 is Belton. Of population, I think the student ratio, in fact, I know it is because I got the numbers from those schools here a while back. It's closer to about 45%, 55%, when you look at the students.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because most of
Not
the
far from-
homes in BISD have
Yeah.
children versus.
Yes. It's not far from half and half between Belton and Temple and Temple city limits.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Very good information.
Appreciate it.
Taking this fit. All right. Moving on is to receive an update from the Killeen Temple Metropolitan Planning Organization regarding the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. Mr. Beckman?
All right, I'm going to introduce James McGill. He's going to do the presentation. And while I hand the clicker to him, I'm going to ask y'all to pass around that clipboard and sign in. Part of this grant requiring in-kind match. One of the ways that we can accomplish that in-kind is showing participation of city staff and elected officials. So this helps us save money. So while we're doing that, some quick background information. Council of Governments in Killeen Temple EO, Killeen Temple MPO. I should be able to say that in my sleep for as many years as I've worked on that. Applied for and received a grant through the US DOT for the Safe Streets and Roads for All to do an analysis region-wide where the safety issues are and identify strategies to make our roads, make our communities safer. And with that, I'll turn it over to James McGill from the Killeen Temple Metropolitan Planning Organization.
Thanks, Jason. Good afternoon, James McGill. I'm the planning manager, and I think our the consultant who's helping us out, our project manager, he's online, so listening in. And if I say anything wrong, I'm sorry.
You got this, James.
Thanks, Dan. Jason already touched on some of this, but we got a grant from USDOT through the Safe Streets and Roads for All program just to analyze roads in our region, which we actually jointly applied with the Central Texas Council of Governments. So we're covering all 7 counties. Part of the plan is objectives besides just the overall plan is there's additional funding opportunities that open up with this plan. And so there's implementation grant funding, and we're looking at highlighting some specific projects that the region, cities, City of Temple, City of Killeen, Bell County, whoever could potentially apply for projects that you're planning. And then also TxDOT's Highway Safety Improvement Program. And then like Jason mentioned, your in-kind tracking helps us meet our 20% match so that we don't have to pay cash. Just a little bit about the SSRA program. This was in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. There's $5 billion total, $1 billion each year. And it's split between action plan grants and implementation grants. To apply for the implementation grant, you have to have an action plan. So that's why we applied for an action plan. They gave us $1.8 million for it. And I guess the expected range of implementation grants is 2.5 to 25 million. And I think that kind of depends on how many people apply and how good applications are. So we are working with Kimley Horn. Dan's with Kimley Horn, and they've been working with a lot of people over the country on these action plan grants and also implementation plan grants. And I guess they got a grant or helped the city of Austin get a $22.8 million grant for intersection safety, pedestrian crossings, roundabouts, and citywide lighting. I think they're very invested and have a lot of experience in the safety realm, so we're happy to be working with them on this. Here are some of the guiding principles for this plan, the safe system approach. Basically, there's 6 things. Says that death and serious injury is unacceptable, but also acknowledges that humans make mistakes and they're vulnerable. If you get in a car crash and you're going really fast, that's someone's going to get hurt or die. We're not metal. It also acknowledges that responsibility is shared, so it's not just like one person or one group that can solve this, but it takes all of us together to solve safety. Safety is proactive and redundancy is critical. And just a side note, if November 7th, 2000 was the last day that there was no deaths on Texas roads. And so TxDOT, we've been in any meetings with them, they are really big on this end the streak thing, and that's because every day someone dies in a car crash. And I don't think anyone in this room would say that's okay. And we're definitely not okay with it. And we recognize it's a big deal and it's a big problem. And like I said, we can't do it on our own, but we got to do something to stop it. And so, and nationwide, this is the case, and that's why there's this program to try and curb these deaths. These are the required components of our action plan. There is a leadership commitment or a goal. The statewide Department of Transportation, they have a goal of 0 deaths by 2050. And they don't say you have to have that same goal or a goal of 0, but need some kind of goal or commitment to trying to drive deaths down. There has to be a planning structure and a comprehensive safety analysis. There's also really big on engagement and collaboration. We have quite a bit of energy trying to make sure we're getting the public's input and support on this plan, and even trying to help identify where there are safety issues, in addition to working with our stakeholders. Equity is a big deal for USDOT right now, and so that's important to this, along with the engagement piece. And then out of it, they're wanting to see some policy and process changes or recommendations for changes, strategy and project selections, and then tracking progress and transparency with reporting on those safety metrics. This is where we're at. We started on September 6th. Kimley Horn started. They have done a safety data analysis, and they've looked at all the roads, but they're trying to focus on the local roads, not like Interstate 35 or some of those larger roads, because TxDOT has purview over those. So some of the major arterials, collectors in the region, and they've developed a high injury network, which is looking at where the crashes have happened and where the fatalities have happened to try and hone in on potential problem areas. We're working on engagement and equity right now, and we have, I think in December, looking at maybe attending some events around the region to try and get input from people. In winter and spring, we'll be looking at trying to figure out some early projects, and the plan is to have some projects identified so that cities and counties who are ready and want to apply for funding for the next round of SS4A implementation grants, which will open late spring, early summer, that we have those identified in our first version of our plan, so that y'all can go after that funding if you want, or whoever can go after that funding. And then there'll be a couple more plans, one in time for the next Highway Safety Improvement Program project call in September next year, and then a final plan January or maybe a little bit later than that. So things that just happened last week, we had a Safe Streets and Roads for All Safety Summit. And I know Jason was there, and I think someone from the police department was there too. And
Yeah, Deputy Chief Barry was there.
yeah, thank you. We had representative from all of our 7 counties, just to get some input and share what this plan is about. We are looking to stand up a safety task force that will steer this, the direction of this plan. And so people who are involved in safety, like police departments or Jason, who's involved in the transportation side of things, wanting to get them on board to help us direct the plan, make sure we're on the same track. Dan and his team and us at K-Tempo, we're looking at engaging leadership at the county and also the city level for specific projects, that project identification piece, and that's going to be over the coming months. And then they're finishing up their data analysis of where crashes have been in the last, we've been looking at the last 5 years or so. And then public engagement events in December and January. I know there's a lot like in the holiday period. So a couple things about defining success. Want to develop a comprehensive safety plan and also capture everybody's input because we're all in this together. Also looking at not just developing a plan and have it sit on a shelf, but develop a plan that can give us more money for the region and improve roads in the region. And then also raise awareness of safety. I know I drive on 35 a lot and see knuckleheads every day. So maybe this plan can help everybody drive a little bit safer. And then implement policy changes and even have projects that can address the safety issues. And I know people don't like roundabouts, but they are safer than other intersections. So maybe people can get behind roundabouts if they knew that it's a safer thing. And ultimately, the goal is to reduce deaths and serious injuries in our region. Jason and I talked about in-kind, but we are tracking that. And then I guess that slide got missing, but on that leadership engagement piece, if you are interested in meeting, we can have we can work with Dan and his team and have a sidebar conversation, or I don't know how that looks like, but wanting to engage on any priority, make sure we're getting the city's priorities because we're the regional transportation plan agency, but really we're here to serve the cities and to make sure the cities are being heard. So yeah, we're open to having meetings, and that's part of the grant or part of the scope of work we have with Dan and his team is to set up meetings with leadership who wants it so that we can get input on project priorities and other things regarding safety and just talk about safety in general because we think it's important. Oh, here's that slide. Yeah, in-person individual meetings to gather feedback on that allows the Safe Streets and Roads for All plan to reflect local priorities. And then if there's any community-specific engagement approaches, I mean, really pushing to not just, oh, we're planners and we think this is best, but like people who are out there driving every day and in the places they live because we can't go everywhere. What are you seeing? What's your input? Then getting some stories in there maybe. So that's the plan. Happy to answer any questions.
Good. Thank you, James.
Yeah.
Council, any questions? Very good. The sign-up sheet's going around, so. All right, moving on to the next item. See the presentation on the fourth quarter financial results for fiscal year ended September 30th, 2023.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I am pleased to present the fourth quarter financial statements for the 12 months or the year ended September 30th, 2023. David, do you mind doing the light? I mean, knock off the, not that much. Looking at revenue, general fund, initially looking at revenues by major source. Total revenues for the year were at 111 million, just a little bit over. The composition of that 111 million is sales taxes, very close to 32%. Ad valorem taxes at 20.76, solid waste 18.21, and on down the list, charges for services, franchise fees. Looking at that 111 million compared to budget, we're at 105% of budget. Budget was 106 million. Sales tax variance with the budget. Sales tax was 2.9 million, greater than budget. We had some adjustments to the property tax roll through the appraisal district of some disputed values, et cetera. We were 382,000 under budget on property taxes, franchise fees. We just, on our electric and gas franchise fees, just larger numbers, kilowatts used, et cetera. 851,000 over budget. Intergovernmental is a grant that we haven't or cashed in on yet, and then charges for services relates some to our parks and rec departments. Fines were down still about 233,000, and then interest, like we've seen in the reinvestment zone, interest rates, big increase in interest rates, and we're over budget 1.6 million. And that is a favorable variance of 4.7 million. Looking at a chart on that, revenues more or less than budget, and it's comparing it to what it looked like last year. Last year, our sales tax was over 4 million over budget. This year, 2.9 interest. Again, franchise fees, but look where the golf course has moved, almost to the 4 slots from the far left. They used to be way over here, so kudos to them. And then over on the far right, we still with the property tax, the fines, and recreation is certain areas is still struggling, but we are seeing in other areas where they are meeting or exceeding their budget. Another revenue highlight that just amazes me, this compares City of Temple to the cities in our region in the state of Texas. We ended the year at over 12% growth compared to last year in sales tax. Look, statewide cities all cities in Texas were a little over 5%, and just we exceeded nearly double of all the cities in our region. So again, very strong sales tax base in Temple, Texas. And this is just looking at, we've been anticipating, year over year, is it going to slow down, or was this one time related to COVID monies? For 2024, we budgeted 39.3 million. So if anything over 7.74% growth will be above budget for the sales tax for 2024. I did want to point out this chart we just received last week, maybe this week, last week, our first allocation for FY 2024. And I've always said before, sales tax, you look at a trend, sometimes months it's up, sometimes it's down. But we had 31 months straight that it was up. And we finally, this first allocation, we were down compared to last year by 3.91%. So again,
why do you think? I mean,
it's 1 month.
Yeah.
There could be, you look at a trend, don't let 1 month.
No, I understand.
Define the future, but I think it's,
October 22nd, 22 was though, so you're coming up from.
Yeah, that could be some of it too. But I think we are seeing a little bit of, I think the economy is, what's that?
It wasn't my fault.
My wife was out of town for a week.
The economy in certain other economic indicators,
Sure.
we're We're slowing down some.
Okay, so we're reflecting the national economic slowdown to a degree, maybe.
And I think we're less, but we are seeing some slowdown. I mean, there's several indicators of that too.
Okay.
I think with interest rates, home
Yeah,
sales,
sure.
all of that. In revenue highlights, we showed our of current collections, 97.88. That's slightly below where we've been in the past. And again, we had the adjustment to the property tax roll. We'll run over you.
Oh, you're
I'm
good.
sorry. Expenditures by type, 106 million was our $106.8 million. For the year ending, almost 2/3 of our budget personnel people, operations 28%, capital, which is capital equipment, et cetera, 3.21. We had transfers and debt service. Looking at looking at actual compared to budget, we were at 88% of budget. But I want to point out, if you roll in our encumbrances, we're at 94.72% of budget, and it's a favorable variance of $6.4 million. So personnel costs 3.8, over budget or under budget, operations 2.5, small amount in capital. And note this, which I'm going to go over what the carry forward encumbrances are. A big portion of this carry forward is related to capital equipment, garbage trucks, police cars, things that has taken a year or two to actually get, once you order them, to get delivered.
Ladder truck.
Well, actually, yeah, ladder trucks, but they're actually in another fund though. But you're right, though. It takes 2 years.
Exactly.
Water encumbrances, their outstanding purchase orders, contracts, or other, and they've encumbered the funds in the current year, and you roll that appropriation into the new year, into 2024. This is looking at the expenditures less than budget by category and comparing it to the previous year. You know, 2022 and 2023, some big numbers in the salary lags. Again, we've had, and then the next slide shows you where that's happening. The police, what's your vacancies at today? That was down from 30 something, right? So we hope that we see that number go, less and less, because we still want to budget at the 100%. We had some hiring turnover in streets, same in parks, but again, with compensation plans, different marketing and or people operations doing different things. I think hearing the departments, we're filling more and more vacancies. So we won't see that year over year. So when you take, when your revenues are at 4 point something over budget, your expenditures are less than budget, and then you need to allocate, you have a $19 million positive variance. How do you allocate that? Well, what we've done in each year, we've supplemented the supplement to the 2024 budget was a little over $5 million. Our fund balance assigned for capital projects adjusted it to $5.2 million. And we adjusted our rainy day balance up from, and it's by a formula, the policy adopted by y'all. It increased 12.7%. And we did an adjustment to it, 23.7 million to 26.7.
At what point do you have enough in a rainy day fund, or do you never have enough because of population growth and expense growth?
Well, it's based on 4 months operations.
Right.
So back in these years when our operations didn't grow, we didn't take it down. We just left it stable.
Yeah.
So if you're based on your formula, if your expenditures increase, you'll continue to increase that to 4 months.
And most cities have a rainy day balance of around 3. Is that correct?
3 to 4 months.
Okay.
Are those cities, well, should we increase it percentage wise more as population is increasing more dramatically than some places.
I think if you take your 4 months and your population will drive your budget. You agree?
Sure.
So that's gonna drive your expenditures.
And also keep in mind that while that 4 months is based off of business as usual. So if we got into a situation where we were recommending going into the rainy day fund, if it was raining, we wouldn't be doing business as usual, right? We would be cutting back on things. So that 4 months would go much farther than that because we wouldn't just keep, we would be doing freezes and we would be doing a lot of other management things to manage through that crisis if we ever experience one.
Good point.
We do earn earnings on the, of course, that balance. And I've had discussions with Dan Wegmiller as it relates to our bond rating and stuff, and this is looked upon very favorably too, which helps us in other areas.
He always mentions that when he makes bond presentations.
One other area that this year, when we allocate, you take the monies and you allocate it to the roll forwards, allocate it to rainy day balance, capital projects funds. We, with the help of Tara, we look at our self-funded or possibly going to, with that number of employees we have now, that we could actually go to a self-funded insurance plan. And in the past, it's important, and we noted this in the few years ago when we went self-funded, that you need that initial investment in the fund in order to make it successful. And so we allocated $2 million to start up our self-funding insurance if we go that direction. So that if not, that could you could allocate that back to capital project funds, but for now, that's what we put it in discussions with Bryn too to allocate the monies there. So any questions on this? Mayor, you need to take a picture.
No, I got it right here. I was trying to figure out what makes it 12.7% change. I was trying to do that math right quick.
It's 3 million over 23.7 million.
Okay, so you were not adding numbers across. Okay.
And this, when we supplement the budget each year, I mean, when we're putting the budget together, we're always forecasting our revenues and expenditures. So we know pretty much where we're going to end the year and what amount would do that. Moving into the water and wastewater fund revenues, we ended the year right at 100% of budget. Our water service was over, wastewater under budget, affluent $345,000 over budget, and then other $257,000. Looking at our expenditures, we ended the year at 95% of budget, favorable variance of about $1.9 million. And again, you see some of the salary lag in the water and sewer fund, water and wastewater fund, but I think Kitten is, again, they have worked with the pay plans, et cetera, and having good positive staffing experiences. Hotel motel fund revenues, we ended the year, this is a little bit different format. Revenues were at 122% of budget, expenditures at 86%, and an excess favorable variance. You combine those together of a little over $1 million. What I wanted to show you is our hotel motel tax receipts. For 2023, they were $3.4 million, an increase of 20% over the prior year. We had this was pre-COVID. COVID, it really hit a big hit, and we've continued to see growth.
Tracy, sorry, would you go back one because I'll get lost? Sorry. Would you talk about expenditures in this category? I'm confused. What is that?
What I've done to change the format up some, this is revenues for the hotel motel fund. And And then expenditures of the hotel motel
Okay,
fund.
but what do we expend?
We have personnel, we have operations of the Mayborn
Okay,
Center,
got it.
the
Okay.
Railroad Heritage
Yeah.
Museum,
Exactly.
Destination marketing.
destination marketing.
I got it. Yeah, thank you.
So
I was thinking
downtown.
that's what it was, but I couldn't remember if that fell into this.
Yes, it does.
Okay,
Thank
you.
Support of arts, cultural activities
Right.
center, Temple Civic Theater, Symphony Orchestra.
There's not a lagging expense. 86% will show up there.
What's that?
There's not a lagging expense that will show up maybe in that number. And that 86% will increase to 100% because of a lagging expense. Is there anything outstanding?
Does it have any, it does have some encumbrances, but not near like what the
Not-
general fund
Not
is.
significant. That's good or bad?
Thank you for going back. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
that.
Again, looking at those increases and with my analysis, when I look at, this is your revenue by month, by year. You see consistently, other than July, your 2023 revenue was greater than all the previous years by month. But then when you go to your occupancy rates, it was above several years, but it's also was lower. I think some of your, when you get the lower occupancy rates, I think part of the increase in the hotel motel tax revenue relates to the price per room, not necessarily more rooms rented. If that makes sense.
Yeah. The B&Bs don't fit into this in any way, do they?
Some of them do.
Okay.
I could ask Laura how many, we have some reporting, I believe.
Okay. So it's just a curiosity.
Yeah, I'll follow
Oh,
up.
no, it's not necessary.
If I remember right, I think like Airbnbs, if someone stays there 3 weeks, right, Airbnb collects it for the first 7 days. And I think after 7 days, they don't pay the occupancy tax anymore.
30 days.
If you take Corpus Christi, you pay it every day until 30 days.
Okay.
You don't pay it.
Right, I thought it was just a week.
Ours maybe do.
State law is 30 days.
Okay.
If that's considered a long-term stay and it's not subject to a hotel occupancy tax after 30 days.
Okay. Interesting.
I don't know what Airbnb collects, but what should be collected would be any stay under 30 days
Yeah.
would be subject to hotel tax.
The drainage fund, we ended the year with revenues at 104%, expenditures at 77%. And some of that, Mayor, is carried forward, not through salary lags, but other encumbrances. When I combine that, you're compared to budget, you're 859,000 excess of revenues over expenditures. Moving on into our federal and state grants awards by type, we had a total of $63.8 million worth of grants on the books. Transportation, 34.8% of that. We still have the pass-through financing amount for the outer or Northwest Loop, 363, that will fall off probably in the next 2 or 3 years. We're still getting annual payments on that. And just wanted to look at some of the transportation grants on the books again, $22.2 million. We have the Surface Transportation Program grant, and that's the Outer Loop West, and that's from Riverside to Tarver or Tarver to Riverside. It's $13.2 million. We got the $5 million for Veterans Memorial Boulevard. Several the sidewalks on Adams and Central, the beautification at the intersection up here has $540,000 grant. And then from the HIP Highway Safety Improvement Program, Georgetown Railroad, 1.2 million, First Street Sidewalk, Apache Drive Sidewalk, East Central Sidewalk, and then the West Central Sidewalk. Investments, we all know interest rates have increased. Our total investments at September 30 were $410.9 million. We're still heavily invested in government pools. We have 8.75% in CDs. We're wanting to move more on into the agency and T-bills now that rates are up. We're working on that, creating some ladders. Looking at our yield on our portfolio is 5.27, up considerably from the year before. Our benchmark is the 90-day yield, and we're still about 5 basis points below that. But again, with the short-term nature of our portfolio, we'll get to that and exceed it. Capital improvement program. End of the year, we had 457 projects on the books, totaling over $500 million, $587 million. You can see the largest funding of it, COs, 30.54%, reinvestment zone at 30.4%, utility revenue bonds at 28.4%. Looking at that, the status of those projects based on dollars, 40% of them are under construction, 28% of it is in engineering, 23% complete, and a little less than 8% in the planning phase. And this chart shows what that capital improvements underway or scheduled at a point in time. And again, of course, we've got the largest ever. But just to note, there could be lots of projects that were in here that are in this number too. So it's at a point in time. And when it's not complete, it rolls to the next year.
Some portion of it rolls to the next year.
Right.
Yeah.
Last slide, strategic investment zones. Since the inception of the program, there's been $2.195 million allocated. The expended or encumbered to date is $1.9 million. The balance at the end of the year was $265,000. I think we added another $200,000 to that in the budget to make it a little less than $500,000. And that completes my presentation for the year. Happy to take any questions.
Amazing. It never slows down.
No.
Never gets smaller.
I want to thank, I know my staff is online, but they really worked hard getting these financials out and the annual report for the reinvestment zone and a big financing plan amendment. So kudos to them for their hard work.
You and all of you are geniuses.
They are.
Very good. Thank you, Tracy. All right, next item. Actually, we're gonna skip item 5 for now. We're gonna table that and we have a couple of conversations with others before we talk about that. So we'll skip 5 and move on to item 6, which is to discuss the proposed public improvement district policy.
Thank you, Mayor and Control. So, we have over the last year or so received a couple of inquiries from developers about the potential use of a public tool that has been authorized by the state called the Public Improvement District. So we wanted to give you guys just kind of a 101 of public improvement districts today and talk about city staff's recommendation that we develop and approve a policy related to administration of PIDs in the future, so that as we receive these requests, we have some policy guidance from council on how we process those and bring those forward for your consideration. So a PID is, as I mentioned, it's an economic development tool that is intended to fund public improvements or to provide supplemental services in a defined contiguous area that is designated either by a city or a county. And it can only be designated upon petition of the majority of the landowners that are within that geographic area. The funding is paid, the improvements or the services are paid solely from special assessments that are levied on the landowners or the property owners within that area for what's considered a special benefit conferred by those projects or services. The designation of a PID and the levy of assessment is a discretionary legislative function. So you have the opportunity to establish PIDs within the community, but there's nothing that obligates or requires you to do so. The statute that authorizes the creation of PIDs is found in the local government code in chapter 372. So just the very basics of a PID, the city council establishes this district by adoption of a resolution after holding a public hearing. The public hearing has to be publicized and written notification of the hearing has to be mailed to all property owners within the proposed district. The district must demonstrate that it confers an extraordinary benefit, not only to the properties within the PID, but also to the public, which includes the entire city. The benefit should be above and beyond the typical improvements and amenities in order to justify the city's involvement in issuing the debt for the improvements. So when would you consider a PID? First, I would just note that we do need to be careful in our evaluation of PIDs, making sure that we are thoughtful in how we evaluate them, so that we avoid a proliferation of special districts throughout the city. They're really for very specific development projects that are not otherwise able to occur in our market, that have something kind of special or unique, or our higher development quality, have beyond typical amenities as part of the development. You would establish a PID to, for example, achieve amenities or get higher development standards that, but for having the PID, you wouldn't be able to have. Some of the community benefits that you're looking for when you're considering a PID, again, are about the quality of development, that the development is meeting or exceeding the city's codes, that there's an extraordinary benefit to the development within the PID. So that could be something that advances the vision and goals of our comprehensive plan. Or one of our neighborhood plans that has enhanced master planned infrastructure, has a different diversity of housing that accomplishes the goal of the city council, has enhanced park space, recreational amenities that are also available to the public. They can't be just private development oriented improvement. So it be, a park that was owned by the HOA of the neighborhood and only able to be used by residents of that neighborhood. It has to be something that is available to the public. Lastly, the development enhances public services and optimizes service delivery through its design, the dedication of sites, connectivity, or other features. So some of the types of public improvements that can be paid for through PID financing include enhanced landscaping, entry features, perimeter fencing, signage, lighting, fountains, art, pedestrian improvements, parks and recreational amenities, regional infrastructure improvements, off-street parking facilities. So those are the type of public improvements that can be paid. Again, things like private swimming pools, things that are just restricted to use of the neighborhood are not considered public improvements that are allowed to be reimbursed through PID funds.
Bryn,
Yes,
enhanced perimeter fencing and enhanced entry features. Are we talking visual, going from just possibly an example from wooden pickets to ornate iron fencing, that's what that means?
Yes, again, the idea is that the PID putting the PID in place allows you to have a higher quality development
Okay.
than would normally be born
Right.
by the market. So there's no specific definition. It's
No,
really
no,
up to, to us and to ultimately to the council. But you would typically, in other communities, what you see, I would say, I'm horrible with development names, but the one off of 31st Street with the or 93 rather, with the stone perimeter fence, so
Sure.
it's something that maybe at Misty Creek, yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
it.
Misty
So,
Creek is what you're, I think, referring to.
yeah, or it doesn't have to be that grand.
No, but that's
something
what I-
other than just the minimum,
I didn't
kind
know
of.
whether the word enhanced meant more security or more visual, or attractive visual, perhaps.
I think that it could be both. It could mean both.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
So the city's responsibilities in administering the PID, the city does covenant to bill and collect the assessments. And if necessary, foreclose on property that has not paid the assessments. The city is responsible for selling the bonds and ensuring that state laws and reporting requirements are followed. The developer or petitioner for the PID ultimately gets the bond money to use for the infrastructure, but the city is the one that sells the bonds and is required to maintain reporting requirements and ensure that we're following all state laws. The public improvement district is a great tool for encouraging or getting a development that, again, that would not otherwise be available in our market. But you do have to balance that out with that it can be a time-consuming endeavor for the city. There's a lot of work that goes into evaluating the PID petition, making sure that it's a feasible project, it's a sustainable project, that all of the checks and balances are in place. So it does take a considerable amount of staff time in order to implement a public improvement district. And then again, once the district is in place for the duration of the time, which is typically the life of the debt, so anywhere from 20 to 30 years, the city is responsible for that PID for that life of it.
Does the city also have the same responsibilities for the mud?
No. A MUD is a separate, so a PID, that's a great question. A PID is not a separate, distinct district. It remains under the control of the city council at all times, whereas a MUD is a separate special district under Texas state law.
Kind of like a mini city there.
Yeah, so it would have a separate board. A MUD would have a separate board and would manage its own affairs, whereas a PID remains subordinate to the city council. A PID allows developers to fund infrastructure development using debt that's issued by the city. The debt is repaid through the property owners within the PID boundaries, so it is not it's not paid. It's not our typical certificate of obligation debt or general obligation debt that is has the full faith and credit of the city and is paid back through property taxes. It's more like a revenue bond that's paid back through the assessments on the property owners within that development, but it is debt that's issued by the city, and it does shift some or all of the development costs from the developer and to the property owners.
Does a homeowner have the ability to have the assessment escrowed just like their
Yes.
tax and interest?
They do, yes, sir. So what is the impact on home prices for homes within a PID? So homes are still within a PID are still subject to market forces. So the market still influences what the price of the home within a PID would be. But PIDs can facilitate the creation of a housing product that better aligns with the current market demands. And what I mean by that is in a market like probably today's market where there's a more balanced supply and demand curve than say there was last year when it was a very hot seller's market. The developer may be required in order to sell that house to offer a reduced cost, and they're able to do that because their development costs have been lowered because they have the city debt financing to pay for all or a portion of the infrastructure. So the developer is able to lower the lot cost and still maintain profitability. But on the other hand, if the market's hot and it's a seller's market, and they sell the house for, what the market can bear, in that scenario, the property owner within the PID could end up paying, the same cost as a house outside of the PID, but then also have to pay the PID assessment through the life of that PID. So it really depends on the market in terms of whether the PID provides kind of a lower upfront cost, but it can in many cases provide a lower upfront cost to a property owner. So again, in a balanced market, a PID could reduce the initial out-of-pocket expenses for a home buyer, but it can result in higher ongoing escrow payments because in exchange for the lower cost upfront, the property owner is paying that annual assessment through the life of the PID debt. So it's, but that can benefit certain home buyers. They have less savings to pay for a higher down payment for a higher upfront cost, but are able to afford the assessment over time. That could help certain homeowners into a market that they may not otherwise be able to buy into.
Hey, Bryn.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a sec. How are the escrow payments readjusted?
Because in addition to the property tax that the city, that any person in the city would pay, those in the PID also have to pay an annual PID assessment. They can do that through escrow payments. They don't have to. They could pay it outside of escrow. They could pay it all up front. There's no penalty for.
You mean upfront at purchase?
Yeah, they could pay the entire assessment off at one time if they chose to.
Okay.
But the assessment amount stays the same throughout the life.
It's a flat.
Okay,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
what my question. It does stay flat, so
Yes.
it does not change on a monthly or bi-monthly
No.
basis
No,
for
it does not.
homeowner. Okay, thank you.
The PID assessment is not tied to the value of the home. It's
Okay.
tied to the repayment of the debt.
Yes, that's exactly right. So
Okay.
it's established, it's a known number at the time of purchase, and it doesn't change over
Yeah.
the life of it. Whereas property tax can change
Sure,
from year
sure,
to year.
sure.
Insurance,
Yeah,
your insurance
absolutely.
can change from year to year. So that portion of your escrow wouldn't change over the life of the bond. So what I mean by higher
No, I
escrow is
understand.
just adding in that additional
Yeah.
payment if you were to do it, if that's how the homeowner
Chose.
chose to do
Right,
that.
thank you.
$100 a month on month one, it's also $100 a month on
Month
40 years
200.
down, or whatever, however long it is.
Right. Typically no more than 30 years. Yeah.
And who's responsible for explaining this to the future homeowner?
There's,
Good question.
there are disclosure requirements that have to be followed, but early on, my understanding is so this tool really started to be used in earnest, I guess, if you will, around 2014. And I think early on there was a lot of surprised people, like there wasn't a great deal of explanation to everyone. I mean, y'all know, you hear the cases often of, I thought this was always going to be a pasture behind me. So there's a lot of paper that people sign when they're buying a house. It's a confusing process, but there are extensive disclosure requirements.
The one in Belton, the mud in Belton.
Yeah.
Three Creeks.
Three Creeks.
A number of folks that are very unhappy and feel like they were blindsided.
Yeah.
So
Is that a PID?
That's
It's
a
a
mud.
mud.
That's the mud. That's what I thought. Okay.
I was just curious if
Mm-hmm.
Right.
they
So-
had the same understanding.
later, the legislature came back and added additional disclosure requirements kind of in response to that. I didn't know I didn't know this is what I was buying into. I don't know how, at the end of the day, I don't know how successful that is, just again, because it is hard to communicate all of the, you get your stack of paper if you're a first time home buyer, you don't read everything, so.
So I'm sorry to ask more questions, but who is responsible for taking care of all the infrastructure, all of the amenities, all the extras? Is it on the back of the cities? Not on the homeowner, because the homeowner is only paying off the debt.
Right, it's all public infrastructure, so it would either be the city or if by agreement, the homeowners association. So you could require, and what I'm building up to is, again, we recommend we have a policy. And one of the elements in that policy is we're gonna recommend that we have a development agreement before you even consider authorizing a PID. So you would lay out in that development agreement your expectations for the development. And so if there's a certain part of that development that you would want the HOA to maintain, a park, for example, an entry feature, whatever it might be, you could do that, but it has to be public infrastructure in order to be paid through the PID. So it can't be an HOA owned park, but it could be a city owned park that we have an agreement with the HOA to maintain.
So then the homeowner would have the PID debt and the HOA debt.
The HOA fee, which isn't really debt, but yes.
Okay.
They would have taxes, property taxes, the PID assessment, and then any HOA fees that, and you don't have, there's nothing that requires an HOA. In the draft policy, we do suggest that preference is given to developments that have an HOA, and encourage HOAs to go alongside these developments. But ultimately, absent an HOA, it would be the city's responsibility to maintain the infrastructure, because again, unlike a MUD, it's not a separate district from the city. In a MUD, the MUD would own the infrastructure and maintain it unless there's another agreement made. Here, it's the cities, it's the cities. And then we can form some type of an agreement with another entity for maintenance, but that would have to be negotiated.
That may be I think it is a Three Creeks, some of the problem is that those MUD fees they're not static. The costs are up, they're asking for more money.
Okay.
Which HOAs and POAs do the same.
You can imagine the confusion with an HOA and a PID with public park, so to speak. The city's maintaining the HOA, residents don't quite understand that it's public. You can just see that headache down the line.
Yeah. And it does have to be public.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah, you can't,
I mean, we've had residents come in and talk about outsiders in their parks already.
Yeah. And I guess to be clear, you can have homeowner restricted amenities, they just can't be paid for with.
Right, no, I understand.
With city debt.
Right.
Again, so staff does recommend that we that you all adopt a PID policy. The purpose of such a policy would be to outline when the council could support using a PID for development, to outline a process to review and analyze petitions for PID developments, establish safeguards for successful debt issuance if that's appropriate within the PID. Again, a PID doesn't have to come with debt issuance, but it usually does. You could do a cash flow PID, but most people are seeking debt issuance when they're looking for a PID. And those safeguards are things like, how long the debt can, how many years the debt can be issued for, collateralization ratios, how much, what the, kind of effective tax rate, how much an assessment could be, the maximum assessment that you could get converted to a kind of tax rate equivalent. So you don't get, to a place where you're between the sale, between property tax and the assessment, you're just in a crazy place with cost to the homeowner. Provides administration guidelines, protection for future homeowners or property owners' interest, ensures that we have consistency in how we review PID requests, and provide guidelines to ensure the project is viable and sustainable. So what staff would recommend is that we bring back, we have been working with our bond counsel and financial advisor team on a draft policy. We would like to bring a detailed review of that to you at your next meeting on the December 7th workshop. And then you could consider, if you're ready, as early as the December 14th meeting for adoption, or if we need more time, that's fine too. But we do, bottom line is staff does recommend we get a PID policy in place, as we have received a few requests for PID consideration, and it is our strong recommendation that we have a policy that guides how we evaluate and potentially move forward with PIDs in the future.
Does this, assuming that you bring
21st, that I just,
Yeah, that's what I was.
sorry,
Oh, yeah.
21st. I'm ready for Christmas. I don't know what I was thinking, sorry.
assuming you bring forth a potential draft, assuming it's accepted by council, how much flexibility for future councils would there be in there?
Well, a council can, it would be a policy that a future council could always change.
Review.
Mhm.
Okay.
And I'll say that the way that our current draft is developed, there's some things that, we would say, we would strongly, some boundaries that we would strongly suggest we stay within. But there's a whole section, for example, of preferential things. So they're not necessarily absolutely required, but things that we would recommend. You give preference to PID that have one or more of these elements, and there's, a list of that. So I think in the draft, we have prepared to show you in the upcoming meetings. I think that it is a flexible document that is still provides good guidance so that we are consistent in our evaluation and administration, but allows each development to be looked at for what it is, because there are, as each development has different circumstances, different things that are, that need to be considered. So I think that we have a draft that will give you that flexibility, as well as good, strong parameters for making prudent decisions for, protecting the city's financial interests, as well as homeowners who would eventually buy into a potential PID development.
And future councils.
Yes, ma'am.
But I understand that the city can be reimbursed or paid for the work that we do. How is that calculated, and where does it come from?
Most cities charge a flat fee or an initial application fee. And then so that's kind of set aside and I guess drawn down against. And then if additional, and that's used to reimburse staff time, as well as we'll need to bring on outside support. So our bond counsel will be involved, our financial advisors will be involved. There's likely many cities, and we would probably recommend here to third-party PID administrator to be hired. So all of that would be paid for through, and if we needed more, then our current policy draft that we have developed would require the developer to deposit more into that fund. Ultimately, then they're reimbursed through the PID funds for that expenditure if they get to the point of issuing the debt. Now, you still have to go through the entire feasibility process, and if ultimately they're at risk, at that point, because if you don't decide to move forward with the PID, or you don't decide to move forward issuing the debt, then there's nothing to reimburse them from, but the city would have been reimbursed.
And those policies and amounts we would set out in our.
That's
policy.
correct. Yes, sir.
We're looking at other cities' PID policies.
Yes, what we did was we started with our bond counsel, McCall Parker Curse, there we go. Who provided many different examples of policies that are, that they've worked with before.
Okay, good.
And we've done several rounds of drafts with them, as well as, our financial advisor, Dan Wegmiller. And so we do have we've used other city policies as a base, but we've made changes that we think would be appropriate for our community as well, through consultation with Dan and Jacqueline and Carol's office.
Good.
So assuming the policies in play, we have the infrastructure to work on PIDs. We have policy in place, et cetera. How long does it typically take from start to finish for the approval process and proceeds to ultimately get to the developer?
I think it depends on the development. I don't know that there's Tracy, do you know if there's a standard time?
Well, it would be, it depend on the developer and how far they were in their process of developing all the numbers and,
How much we wanted, what we wanted to see feasibility wise.
Okay.
How long it takes to negotiate the development agreement. So there's a lot of factors that would impact that.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Be
It's
complicated,
interesting to look
confusing.
at the, I'm sorry, it's just kind of interesting to look at the mud possibility
Mhm.
within the past 2 months,
Right.
and now this.
Okay,
takes two with, and when you get to this point, PID bonds usually carry a lower credit rating and a higher interest rate. But interest rates now on PID bonds significantly impact the development cost.
Does a PID or a MUD, I guess, in any way affect the city's credit rating?
it still shows up on the city's quote unquote balance. Right? It still shows up as outstanding debt. Is that a true statement?
I haven't studied it that far, Mayor. I could find out from Dan with a
Yeah.
quick question. But I'm not sure.
This is really important, that if we could just hear, Dan's comments.
Rick back here is saying that it does not show up.
They're revenue bonds, they're not a direct obligation. They'll probably be in the footnotes, but not on the balance sheet in any way.
Thank you. I want to hear it from Dan too.
I agree, he's great. We work with him and McCall all the time.
Okay. All right, council, any other questions? Interested to learn more as we go. Okay, very good. Then we'll move on to item 7, which is to receive.
Oh, I'm sorry, one last thing. Yeah, sorry. Your PowerPoint, is that printable?
Sure.
Can I have a copy?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Next item is to receive an update on the regional habitat conservation plan.
Thank you.
Mary, you're up.
Yes, sir. I was gonna look at the item real quick. I apologize. I'm so excited about this. So item J on the consent agenda is an item related to authorizing an interlocal agreement, kind of our second phase of the regional habitat conservation plan between several entities and within Bell and Coryell County. Council may recall, we talked about this a while ago. This is related to our blind spider friends. And because we have this kind of second phase on the agenda for adoption, I'd ask David if he could just give y'all a brief update of where we're at with that process, just so you would know.
And so just quickly, we've broken this into 3 different phases. Initially, phase 1 was apply for a grant. So step 1, apply for a grant. We received a grant as a group to fund the study and the creation of a regional habitat conservation plan. So what that means is that we're going to form a set of documents that will guide an organization so that if someone does have karst invertebrates, or there's actually other endangered species within Bell County or threatened species within Bell County that we're going to be exploring as well. If you have a development that's planned to occur in a threatened or endangered species habitat area, then you can use this regional habitat conservation plan. It's a pre-approved plan through Fish and Wildlife Services that tells you how you mitigate for any habitat, or what portions of that habitat must be conserved. How can you mitigate for what goes on around that habitat? What's it going to cost to relocate portions of that habitat? All of those details are included in this plan. And it requires a revolving fund to be placed around that from year to year. So phase 2 and phase 3 of this project, we will be studying and we'll be developing what is the plan, and then what does that annual contribution look like for any partnering entity that's inside of this group. So this would be a long-standing group, and it would require funding long-term if we choose to participate in that. Phase 2 and phase 3 don't require that long-term financial commitment yet, but it gets us from the point where we are today to the point to where we can say, this is what it looks like if we want to participate. Let's choose to go ahead and go forward. And from that point, phase 4 plus then becomes, what does that look like from year to year?
So you said our blind spider friends, wasn't there another one that you talked
It was salamander.
With Blackburn and with Bell County had an issue.
But is that salamander in Temple or in Salado?
I don't know that we have any instances in Temple.
I've seen them.
No, you haven't.
They didn't see me, you're blind, but I saw them. I saw a salamander with a blind spider riding on its back.
Oh, for God's sake.
We can see some golden cheek warbler, for example, is something that's probably more likely to be seen right here in Temple.
Well, we know the golden cheek warblers are seen moving through Temple to nest at Fort Cavazos.
Correct. Correct.
And
I don't think that we have confirmed even any karst invertebrates. At least we didn't last time.
So to date, there have been 0 karst invertebrates physically found in Bell County. What we know though is that
Bell County?
In Bell County.
I thought they were found in Salado.
And the salamanders are so karst invertebrates, we're talking about spiders and other little creepy crawly critters. So the endangered or threatened karst invertebrates have not been found in Bell County, but they've been found all around Bell County. And a lot of the reason they haven't been found in Bell County is probably because we have not looked for them.
We've already.
Nothing to see here.
So we know that continued efforts on Fort Cavazos, more federal money coming in.
Yes.
All new federal contracts are requiring that you look more heavily at that thing. And then as federal highway money continues to come in, the regulations are trending such that we're going to have to start to explore this more long term. And what this is, yes, this is a preemptive plan so that when we get there, we're not having to spend the 2 and 3 years developing this plan. It'll already be in place and there'll be an option for someone that is on path of a development to be able to do something with it.
In Temple.
In Temple, assuming we continue to participate beyond the horizon of phase 3.
But what is this mean about Coriel?
So there are portions of Coriel County that are participating in this same study as well.
I talked to the judge, Coriel County judge yesterday.
And that's where the name for the RHCP, Belcor, Bell County, Coriel County. So it's a partnership, Bell County, Coriel County, MPO, and several cities within the 2 of those.
I'd say we participate within the mayor.
It all started with the blind spiders when we got notified from Fish and Wildlife that they were evaluating putting Temple, and I forget the name, I forget what it's called, but they're evaluating whether Bell County was gonna be included in the zone for karst invertebrate, and that was what triggered I think that came to Judge Blackburn, and then that's what kind of triggered our regional discussion about, okay, if these things are gonna start getting studied more closely, we want to have something prepared. We want to be prepared so that we don't stop development because we don't have a plan in place to mitigate impacts to endangered species once they're listed. Right now, I think maybe the warbler is the only one that's listed, but there could be more coming. Blind spiders.
And this is, we did mention the salamander piece in Salado. So this is also gearing up so that we're scientifically well prepared when something starts to make that transition to being a listed species. You don't want your science to be trying to play catch up at the time when there's pending law that may be coming online. So we want to be well ahead of that so that when the listing does start to occur, we have good information as to whether that needs to be argued, accepted, included in the plan. Where do we need to go? That's what this plan will get us.
That's good governance.
Which part? Answer.
That's all I'm saying.
It was plenty. It was plenty. Making
Well-
fun of poor blind spiders.
They not be poor. All right. So that's it. Look at us. 10 minutes after 4, we're through the agenda.
Unheard of.
There's no excuse for not being on time today. You have 50 minutes. But unless I get a phone call.
Yeah. We're good.
All right, very good. Yeah. Yeah, so 10 minutes after 5, I will adjourn this workshop for the city council. We'll convene in chambers at 5 p.m. Thank you.